Good afternoon, members of the press, and good afternoon, Bahamas. My name is Carl Smith, and I'm the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management, and Reconstruction. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this press conference for a presentation of the Minister's report on the work of the Ministry and its agencies, namely the National Emergency Management Agency, or NEMA, and the Disaster Reconstruction Authority. The report will be on the work of these agencies and the ministry over the period of COVID-19 pandemic. I will be the moderator for this press conference. Along with me in this space are officers of NEMA, in the person of the Director, Captain Stephen Russell, and the GRA in the person of the Project Manager, Mr. Wendell Grant. Following the Minister's presentation, I will invite each member of the press to ask a maximum of 2 questions that will be directed to the Minister or the support staff. I now invite the Minister, the Honorable Hiram Lewis, to proceed with his report. Minister Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you very much, P.S. Carl Smith. My fellow Bahamians, good afternoon. I begin by taking this opportunity to thank the hard-working staff and dedicated members of the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, and the Disaster Reconstruction Authority, DRA, as well as our many public and private partners for their overwhelming support in preparing for, responding to, and assisting with the recovery and rebuilding efforts resulting from Hurricane Dorian and in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The past year has been one filled with unprecedented challenges for the Bahamas. On the heels of Hurricane Dorian, we were faced with a once-in-a-generation pandemic of COVID-19. Through these trying times, it is important that we each do our part, continue to exercise caution and follow safety protocols to safeguard not only our own health, but also the health of the most vulnerable among us, including our own loved ones. Hurricane Dorian not only uprooted the lives of thousands of Bahamians, it also disrupted the status quo and made clear the fact that now is the time for action. Climate change is a global reality, and it is affecting the Bahamas. We have been faced with the choice to either continue down the path we have always traveled or to adjust course to avoid the catastrophe staring us in the eyes. When the government of the Bahamas enacted the Disaster Preparedness Response Act in 2006, it adopted the Comprehensive Disaster Management, CDM strategy. This strategy is an integrated approach to disaster management that encompasses the management of all hazards through all phases of the disaster management cycle, namely prevention and mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery, and rehabilitation. It involved the public and private sectors, as well as all segments of civil society and the general population. The goal of CDM is to enhance efforts aimed at sustainable development by reducing risks and losses associated with natural and technological hazards and the effects of climate change. Government's commitment to the CDM strategy was further cemented when the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction and the DRA were formed to work in harmony with the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, following the severe impact that Hurricane Dorian had upon the Bahamas in early September 2019, which resulted in extensive loss and damage. The Bahamas government, with the assistance of local and international partners, has invested heavily over the years in disaster preparedness and response. Although the Bahamas has been improving in the area of disaster preparedness and response, there is still much to be done. Hurricanes are becoming more ferocious and frequent. The intensity of these hurricanes, rising sea levels, destruction of our community built along the shoreline and the destruction of our ecosystem around fisheries and marine lives are all elements of climate change that demands urgent and focused attention. Following Hurricane Dorian, it was recognized that there is a need to strengthen existing recovery strategies and move towards a more comprehensive and structured process that includes the articulation of a resilient recovery policy, strategy, and implementation plan with appropriate institutional arrangements. The intent is to ensure that recovery planning operations are well informed, sustainable, efficiency, and of course, timely. Hence, the remit of the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction that encompasses improving the framework from recovery planning in the Bahamas. The notion of building back better surfaced following Hurricanes Jane and Francis, both were Category 3 hurricanes that impacted again the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama in September 2004, within 3 weeks of each other. The events of Hurricane Dorian in September again, 2019, catapulted the move to solidify a policy of building a resilient state and a shift from recovery as a reactive exercise to a more comprehensive approach that is proactive and strategic. As a means of enhancing recovery planning, the government of the Bahamas requests the support of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, in elaborating recovery coordination and planning. As such, the UNDP engaged the University of the West Indies, UWI, to provide advisory services in the development of a draft policy, strategy, and implementation plan, as well as recommendations on the institutional framework to execute and operationalize the resilient recovery vision. Post-disaster recovery planning means making infrastructure resilient, restoring our economy, enhancing our social protection system, facilitating and enabling paradigm shifts in policy and development planning. And on a human level, it means ensuring that every person in our country has the know-how, capacity, and resources to rebound stronger after a disaster or pandemic. The UWI advisory team worked in close collaboration with a broad range of stakeholders to frame a suitable policy statement for resilient recovery in the Bahamas, articulate the critical elements to guide the development of the recovery strategy and implementation action plan, and the institutional structures needed to support the operationalization of the resilient recovery policy. The National Policy Vision Statement that was developed during the consultation reads as follows. The Bahamas is an archipelagic country that prepares for, withstands, and recovers from man-made and natural disasters and promotes the safety and quality of life of all its citizens in resilient and sustainable communities with access to critical services and infrastructure in all of its islands through education and awareness, promotion of respect for the natural and cultural environment, community-based approaches, and a whole of government commitment to resilient development. In September of this year, the UWI advisory team submitted its report to my ministry with recommendations to garner wide national buy-in and ownership for the goal of recovery planning. The reports have been accepted by my ministry and endorsed by the cabinet. In this regard, my ministry will take the following actions. 1, organize internal consultation on the draft recovery policy. This will include the preparation and sharing of information, notes, and policy brief for heads of key agencies. 2, convene meetings to review the roles and responsibilities suggested in the strategy implementation plan and the associated timeframes and make the appropriate adjustments. 3, distill and develop the necessary guidelines that inform how shared roles can be undertaken for transitional recovery services to be made seamless. 4, establish a framework for the modalities of capturing, packaging, accessing, and sharing of data related to recovery assets, skills, services, and spatial information on social assets and vulnerability. 5, undertake discussions on the metrics for resilient reconstruction. 6, review existing incentives for recovery and for encouraging risk-sensitive development. 7, identify and map existing financial instruments that can support recovery and reconstruction programs. Develop a strategy for the effective use of these and provide orientation for the key persons responsible for development and public financial management in the government. 8, establish a national private sector recovery roundtable to promote a national agenda for business contingency planning and continuity management. 9, initiate a dialogue on a resilient public service and continuity of government. And 10, establish a time frame for the review and adoption of the Bahamas Resilient Recovery Policy. I now turn briefly to the work of the National Emergency Management Agency, or NEMA. With the formation of the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction and the Disaster Reconstruction Authority, NEMA can more focus its attention on disaster mitigation, preparedness, and relief response. In essence, assuming a balanced approach that includes ex ante and ex post activities associated with disaster management. Following Hurricane Dorian, an after-action review was undertaken to facilitate a comprehensive assessment of some of the key and critical functionalities of our national disaster management system, specifically the emergency support functions and the National Emergency Operations Center. That review has resulted in improvement being made to information technology data management for the enhancement of data collection and information sharing, among other things. NEMA's website, I'm happy to say this, NEMA's website, nema.gov.bs, has been upgraded. 3 portal areas have been added to the website to provide access to various support groups to holistically communicate on any given situations. These support groups comprises of NGOs, the 14 emergency support functions, EFS, and NEMA's internal administration staff. Additionally, the public can now access the following services on the NEMA's website. Persons affected by a disaster can sign up online for support and guidance, and persons offering voluntary services can register online for an accreditation and approval. NEMA's call center is now digitized. Details are logged in by a team and assistance given accordingly. At the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, NEMA actively assisted with logging calls in its newly established database that has the ability to generate various reports. The Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction and NEMA continues to work along with the Ministry of Health through its Emergency Operations Center, EOC, providing advice and mobilizing resources to assist with combating the coronavirus pandemic. It is noteworthy that NEMA was most instrumental in coordinating a team of volunteers to assist with managing government quarantine sites for Bahamian nationals and residents who returned from the United States. NEMA, in collaboration with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, better known as SEDEMA, was able to coordinate the delivery of 3 shipments of personal protective equipment, or PPEs, to the Bahamas. The donations were from the United Arab Emirates, UAE, the Caribbean Development Bank, and the Jack Ma Foundation. All items secured through SEDEMA were turned over to the Ministry of Health to assist with ongoing COVID-19 operations. Adherence to COVID-19 protocols resulted in NEMA having to conduct most of its training activities virtually. A planned full-scale simulation exercise dubbed Restore Island Keys that was designed to simulate a Category 4 hurricane and test the adjustment made post-Hurricane Dorian to the National Hurricane Preparedness Plan was scaled back to a tabletop exercise. The exercise was conducted with the participation of government agencies, the Bahamas Red Cross, the Pacific Disaster Center, or PDC, Global Support and Development, and U.S. Northern Command, better known as U.S. NORTCOM. Given the required changes that were implemented in designated shelters due to COVID-19, specialized training was conducted on shelters and shelter management. NEMA, in conjunction with USAID, Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, also provided training in initial damage assessments. The recent receipt of a donation of 3.8 million US dollars worth of equipment and supplies from the United States government through the U.S. Northern Command followed months of weekly meetings to clearly identify critical needs and the resources suitable to match our needs. The equipment and supplies include 12 16-feet medically wally rescue boats that are outfitted with 40 horsepower Yamaha engines, safety stretchers, life vests, and 20-foot trailers. Emergency relief supplies to augment stocks in the 3 emergency relief warehouses that are situated on Great Inagua, Grand Bahama, and at the Coral Harbor base. Personal protection equipment, PPEs, to guard against COVID-19 and to support the shelter program in the Family Islands. Communication support supplies for Motorola handheld radios that are used in the National Interagency Trunking Communication System. Materials to repair government-designated hurricane shelters in Grand Bahama and Abaco that sustained damages during Hurricane Dorian, and mobile air-conditioned shelters with backup electrical supply, kitchen, and personal hygiene facilities to provide for rapid and efficient sheltering for affected persons. A portion of the sheltering facility was erected and is currently in use at the South Beach Clinic to assist with providing medical attention to clients during the COVID-19 pandemic. These equipment and supplies position our communities to better prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies and disasters. Prior to Hurricane Dorian, NEMA, in collaboration with the U.S. Northern Command, planned to conduct a series of refresher floodwater rescue and volunteer firefighting training courses on 12 family islands where equipment had been delivered and previous training courses have been conducted. The refresher training courses will resume once protocols to suppress the spread of COVID-19 are relaxed. Also, prior to Hurricane Dorian, NEMA engaged 3 local companies to install a series of VHF radios and repeaters in 12 family islands to support the local disaster communication programs. The installation process will resume once travel challenges are resolved. NEMA continues to work with local, regional, and international partners, seeking out opportunities for knowledge exchange and mobilizing resources to assist with capacity building in the area of disaster management throughout the country. The National Emergency Management Agency is partnering with the Pacific Disaster Center, or PDC, in conducting a national disaster preparedness baseline assessment. The baseline assessment is a sustainable system for assessing, understanding, updating, and applying critical risk information in decision-making. The assessment provides the necessary tools, scientific data, and evidence-based practices to effectively reduce disaster risk. The process includes risk and vulnerabilities analysis, which examines several components of risk, including exposure to hazards, vulnerabilities, coping capabilities, and existing disaster management capabilities. In summary, the information emerging from the assessment will add value to decision-making at the national and local levels. Completion of the assessment, which was launched in June of 2019, has been slightly delayed due to restrictions in movement to curtail the spread of COVID-19. Today, in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, NEMA continues to transport basic disaster relief supplies from its emergency relief warehouse in New Providence for persons in need in Grand Bahama, Abaco, and among various charitable organizations in New Providence. NEMA is now implementing 15 contracts as a part of a collaborative effort with the United States Northern Command to repair a number of government-designated shelters that were damaged as a result of Hurricane Dorian. 13 of these shelters are in Grand Bahama and 2 are in Abaco. NEMA has received approval in principle from SEDEMA for funding 3 projects valued at $10,000 each. These funding has been earmarked for 1, logistics and warehouse management training, community emergency response team training, and radio operators training in the Family Islands. NEMA continues to collaborate with other ministries and departments to implement the milestones and indicators in the Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management Plan for the Bahamas. The plan, which was crafted with the support of the Inter-American Development Bank, or IDB, was a prerequisite for the Bahamas qualifying for a $100 million contingency credit facility loan prior to Hurricane Dorian. The contingency credit facility for natural disaster emergencies is one of the IDB's main tools to help countries develop effective strategies for natural disaster financial risk management. The plan focuses on the following key pillars. 1, disaster risk management governance. 2, risk identification. 3, risk reduction. 4, preparation for emergency and response. And 5, financial protection and risk transfer. The Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction and other key agencies such as the Ministry of Finance and the Department of Meteorology will continue to collaborate with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, CRIF, to ensure that the Bahamas obtains the most cost-effective policy operations for tropical cyclones and excessive rainfall events. CRIF limits the financial impacts of natural hazards to governments by quickly providing short-term liquidity when a policy is triggered. CRIF has made 2 payouts totaling some US $12.8 million to the government of the Bahamas following the passage of Hurricane Dorian. We are seeking to determine the cost-effectiveness of the fisheries industries and utility cooperation participating in the CRIF insurance program so that they too are able to be in a position to receive short-term liquidity if those sectors are severely impacted by a natural disaster. Guide to Housing Standard for the Bahamas. It is my pleasure to launch the release of the Guide to Housing Standard for the Bahamas, Build Back Better. The guide was produced by the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction in conjunction with the Ministry of Public Works. The guide could not have been prepared without the assistance of the United Nations Development Programs, Engineers Without Borders, Shelter Sector Bahamas, NEMA, the Building Control Department of the Ministry of Public Works, the University of the West of the Bahamas School of Architecture, and private sector engineers, architects, and contractors. The impact of Hurricane Dorian on the housing stock of the second and third most populated islands of the Bahamas, namely Grand Bahama and Abaco, resulted in damage to residences that is estimated to exceed $100 million US. The Disaster Reconstruction Authority, through its home repairs program, has registered over 4,000 residents for home repairs on the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama. As of July 1st, 2020, the Grand Bahama Port Authority estimated that within the 200 square miles district of the Port Authority, approximately 4,637 homes were impacted to varying degrees by the storm. Rapid assessments were conducted in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian by teams of local professional architects, engineers, building contractors, and Ministry of Public Works technical officers. The site inspections revealed that, as expected, there was extensive damage due to flooding from wind and sea surge. However, for the damages not related directly to wind and sea surge, damage was largely due to the level of non-compliance. And I repeat that, the level of non-compliance with the prescriptive requirements of the current Bahamas Building Code. In an effort to increase building resilience and to ensure that reconstruction, renovation, repair, and new construction to residential buildings adhere to Build Back Better principles. Build Back Better guides serve as an easy reference tool for construction methods and details that comply with the minimum standard of the Bahamas Building Code and local construction manual for small buildings. It is therefore our hope that as we seek to rebuild to mitigate against future hurricanes, homeowners, builders, and contractors will become familiar with and adhere to code compliance. Hard copies of this publication will be available at various local locations, including NEMA, the DRA, the Ministry of Public Works, hardware stores, and chambers of commerce. Electronic versions of the publication are available on the website of NEMA, the DRA, and other agencies. On the 1st December 2019, the Disaster Reconstruction Authority began its rebuilding efforts in Abaco, its Keys, and in Grand Bahama. As a result of the level of devastation, steps were taken to evaluate the most urgent needs and to develop work programs around 7 reconstruction priorities, namely environment, education, economy, health, housing, infrastructure, and systems improvements. It was determined that the areas requiring immediate attention included debris management, community and marine cleanup, development of a small home assistance program, housing for the temporary, medium, and long-term solution, school repairs and construction of community centers that will also serve as hurricane shelters. Significant progress has been made with reconstruction effort, and I now invite the project director of the Disaster Reconstruction Authority, Mr. Wendell Grant, to share that progress with you.
Thank you, Minister. The Disaster Reconstruction Authority, as indicated by the Minister, have identified 7 key areas to focus our efforts on. The rebuilding and reconstruction in the disaster zones. Those areas are the environment, housing, education, health, economy, infrastructure, and finally, system improvement. As with the entire Bahamas, the emergence of COVID-19 has impacted the work of the DRA, and as many others have, adjustments were made to ensure the safety and well-being of not only our staff, but the greater Bahamian community. Some of these changes include installing social distancing signage and plexiglass dividers at our various offices in Abaco and Grand Bahama, and providing PPE to team members that come into contact with clients. We provided team members with laptops, cell phones, and mobile hotspots to ensure they were properly equipped for the transition to working from home during lockdowns, which allowed for seamless collaboration through web-based platforms. We also instituted a staggered shift system to minimize the potential for office spread, with office staff complements at a maximum of half capacity. We have been able to effectively adhere to social distancing protocols and have ensured hand sanitizers, disinfectant sprays, and cleaning agents are readily available for all of our team members. As for the DRA work happening in the field, in-person home assessments were paused to ensure the safety of our assessors, contractors, and of course, the homeowners. When work resumed, team members were provided with masks and trained to follow strict safety guidelines. One of the first steps of the rebuilding and restoration efforts is maintaining the impacts made on the environment by the significant amount of debris left behind. Since the passing of Hurricane Dorian, the removal of debris and hazardous materials has been a critical part of restoring normalcy in the disaster zones. To date, more than 3 million cubic yards of debris have been removed across the Abacos and Grand Bahama through community cleanup exercises. This is an ongoing process and has been a collaborative effort with other government agencies, key NGO partners, and the dedication of local Bahamian contractors. Marine cleanup includes the removal of large debris consisting of building materials from homes, roofing, boats, and other harmful materials from the water. In a recent exercise in McLeanstown, East Grand Bahama, we were able to remove 18 vehicles from the harbor with the aid of local businesses. When the debris is collected, it is taken to our debris management sites. The DRA currently operates major debris management sites in both Abaco, at Treasure Key and Spring City, as well as in Grand Bahama at High Rock, Pelican Point, and McLeanstown. Housing, the DRA's second priority area, includes our Small Home Repair Assistance Program, which began in February 2020, as a means to provide much-needed assistance to homeowners after the passing of Hurricane Dorian. Once an assessment is complete to determine the level of damage, access to funds is granted, which can be designated to be used towards home improvement materials from approved local vendors, labor costs, or any combination of both. To date, the Small Home Repair Assistance Program has 4,559 registered homeowners, 3,686 approved homeowners, and over $11 million dispersed. The DRA has also worked with partners to provide temporary housing solutions, including 150 domes in Abaco and the Keys, and our team is currently erecting 20 modular homes for families in Sweetings Key, East Grand Bahama. Additionally, at this time, the DRA has been provided with two 60-acre tracts at Spring City and Wilson City, Abaco, by the government of the Bahamas for the development of mixed-use housing communities. And just last week, we conducted a site visit in Central Pines, Abaco, on the future site of a 46-home subdivision being developed by one of our many Abaco-based NGO partners. Further, we are also progressing the development of a medium-term housing community for public offices in Spring City, Abaco, using the P3 model. Education. Our third priority area, as imagined, has been especially challenging for those in the disaster zones in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. As a part of the DRA education priority, in September 2020, the DRA facilitated a generous donation of 750 tablets to schools across Abaco and Grand Bahama for the most vulnerable students, ensuring that they were equipped for the upcoming school year's virtual learning and hybrid curriculum, as repairs are ongoing at several of the schools in the central Abaco area. This initiative was made possible by partnerships with the Member of Parliament for North Abaco, the Bahamas Hope Foundation, Odyssey Aviation, and STARS Bahamas. Health. Through our focus on health, we are proud to say that 100% of the medical facilities on the Abaco mainland are open and operational. And in Grand Bahama, $12.1 million in ongoing renovations are being done at the Rand Memorial Hospital. The Public Hospitals Authority is also planning further restoration upgrades in the amount of $5 million for that island. Hurricane Dorian ravaged the economies of Abaco and Grand Bahama. With the DRA's focus on the economy, we have made a dedicated effort to restart businesses, and in conjunction with the government's Small Business Development Center, more than $5.4 million has been injected into those disaster zones. The DRA has spearheaded restoring commerce through P3 partnerships with the derelict vehicle storage yard, recycling at the debris sites, and housing and commercial real estate developments. With respect to infrastructure, the Fishing Hole Road was repaired in Grand Bahama. Planning for Abaco Port redevelopment and roadwork improvements are just key parts of the infrastructure improvements which are being planned currently. Under system improvement, 3 major projects are underway in the disaster zones, including a shift to renewable energy with the installation of solar streetlights, landfill developments in Abaco, and municipal waste being barged from isolated keys. The DRA continues to provide assessment, planning, execution, and support toward the reconstruction of the vital systems of our society.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendell. And in closing, the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management, and Reconstruction remains committed to ensuring that its programs and projects are executed with the spirit that embodies its policy vision statement. Currently, no effort is being spared to restore Abaco and Grand Bahama. The task of reconstruction is great. It is not a sprint. It is a journey. Complete recovery will not happen overnight. With all of us working together, I am confident that with God's grace, we will achieve a more resilient and sustainable Bahamas. I thank you, and I now turn it back over to Permanent Secretary Carl Smith, our moderator.
Thank you, Minister. I will now invite Mr. Matthew Moxey of Eyewitness News to ask his 2 questions. Mr. Moxey.
Yes, good afternoon. Minister Lewis, the IOM recommended the introduction of a shelter manager program, as well as the creation of a thorough mass evacuation plan for all of the family islands and the pre-positioning of some equipment at shelters. Is the government minded to adhere to these suggestions, and have any of these been done as yet?
As stated earlier, the Bahamas has a comprehensive plan, not only to build back better, but as stated, we spoke about our resilient recovery policy as well as our risk profile. So we know exactly what needs to be done locally, and we will not be distracted or sidetracked from doing that. We understand that having the proper shelters in place and protecting lives is of paramount importance, so we will remain focused on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. And my next question is, many persons who had loved ones lost during Hurricane Dorian are still unable to access the assets of their loved ones due to, the law on missing persons. So is your ministry working with the AG's office and other relevant agencies to reform this law for instances like Hurricane Dorian? As some persons, would have expressed that the assets gained could be a great help in not only funding rebuilding efforts, but so they could settle certain affairs.
Yes, in brief, that matter is being handled by the AG's office along with the coroner's office. So that matter is out of the hands of the Ministry of the DRA as we now stand.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moxie. I now invite Ms. Altaviz Mullings of ZNS Bahamas with her two questions.
Good afternoon, PS. Good afternoon, Minister. Minister, my first question is about the small repairs program. While your colleague provided some information, I wanted to know whether or not there are still more Bahamians who are interested in the program, because during your budget address earlier this year, you stated that COVID-19 also placed a hold on the program. Can you give us an update on what's been going on so far with the program? Are a lot of Bahamians still taking advantage or want to take advantage of it?
Thank you very much, Altavis. Very good question. As stated earlier, some 6,000 plus persons had applied. We have approved over 4,200 odd number of homes. We will honor our commitment. All of those persons that were assessed, all of the vouchers that were issued, we are seeking to honor those. As you would note and be aware, the COVID-19 pandemic shifted a lot of the responsibilities and the priorities of persons who would have pledged during the pledge conference. And of course, the pledge is not binding. So there were some serious shortfalls based on our expectations. However, we are working as best as we can. We're looking for more partnerships. We're looking for more funding. But it is our focus, it is our commitment to honor all of those that we've committed to, and we will ensure that we accommodate as many Bahamians as possible. When I mentioned that there was over 6,000 who made application, only about 4,200 qualified. Persons who didn't qualify for various reasons. Either they had insurance in place or there were ownership issues, etc. But all of those that was approved and we committed to, we will do our best to honor those commitments.
Thank you, Minister, for answering my question. My second question is about international assistance. I know a lot of NGOs across the world came to Abaco and Grand Bahama to assist post-Hurricane Dorian. Is there a presence of international assistance still on those islands 1 year later?
Oh yes, absolutely. Samaritan's Purse never left. Very active in Grand Bahama and Abaco. Church by the Sea did tremendous work in Treasure Key and Abaco mainland. There are other NGOs still present. And as I indicated earlier, one of the good things that we now have going on with NEMA is persons who are wishing to now assist us, as was not done in the past. We now have a system where they can apply as volunteers and they can be properly accredited, so we'll know who all is here, because in fact, there were NGOs here working that we weren't even aware of. So now we have that portal open. We now register all of our NGOs, international and local, and we can better coordinate our efforts.
Thank you for your questions, Mrs. Mullings. I now invite Tyler Simonet of JCN to ask her questions.
Yes, good afternoon, PS, Minister Lewis, and to all who are listening. My first question is for Minister Lewis. In recent months, have you seen a large number of people returning home and rebuilding after having to move or evacuate to Nassau after the storm, despite the pandemic still being an ongoing problem? Or have those numbers of families returning slowed down since COVID-19 came to the Bahamas?
Bahamians are determined to return home. And yes, we have seen a great numbers of Bahamians returning home, particularly on the island of Abaco, because we didn't have that mass evacuation from Grand Bahama. And if you would note, when Mr. Grant advised about the debris management site, that's one of the reasons why we have ongoing debris collections, because person who came home later this year, or during the first quarter of this year, they're now starting their reconstruction. And as a result of this reconstruction, we have quite a bit of debris again that we have to further manage. So to answer your question, yes, we are seeing Bahamians return, and the fact is, we will go to the United States, we will go away, but at some point, Bahamians will want to return home, and they are coming back home, and we welcome them to come back home to help us rebuild the Bahamas.
Next
Right.
question, Ms. Simonette. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, it's okay. Thank you so much for that response, Minister. And my second question is, back in August, the Minister of Health, Bernard Wells, mentioned that Part C of the Rand Memorial Hospital is expected to be completed by the end of November. I just wanted to know, is that project still on schedule?
Oh, yes. The Minister of Health has an update coming up, and I don't want to preempt the statement, but being resident on the island of Grand Bahama, I take keen interest in the Rand Memorial Hospital, and yes, it is progressing very well, and the residents of Grand Bahama and the visitors and residents who would be here on this island and needing the service of the Rand Memorial Hospital has a pleasant surprise in the making.
Thank you, Ms. Simonette. I now invite Ms. Sloan Smith of Eyewitness Digital to ask her questions.
Hi, good day, PS. Good day, Minister, and good day, Bahamas at large and media colleagues. My
day.
first question is a piggyback off Altui's question. You would have noted that about 4,000 residents have already been approved for the small homes program, and we know that there have been some challenges in terms of paying out some of those vendors. Are you able to indicate how much money is still outstanding in payouts to those vendors? And whether or not that has slowed down the rebuilding efforts on both Abaco and Grand Bahama?
Thank you very much for the question. We know exactly what our needs are. We are currently reconciling all of our accounts. We know that there's a major shortfall. The overall program is going to run well into over $20 million. But as it stands right now, we have accounts to reconcile. And once we were to reconcile those accounts and run our numbers, then we will be able to better answer that question and make a determination of the way forward.
Okay, great. And just if I'm going to ask my second question, but not a part of that was whether or not that has slowed down the rebuilding efforts, especially in the COVID era. My second question has specifically to do with Abaco and whether or not there's been a directive on what will happen with the cleared site, the mud and the pigeon peas. It's been previously suggested that it could be used for a commercial property or memorial site. And we just wanted to get some understanding of whether or not, you've resolved land ownership, what the plan is for that right now.
Well, I can only say at this moment that those areas has been declared no-build zones, and that the land use responsibilities now is under the Office of the Prime Minister directly, and at the appropriate time, persons responsible for those areas will make the necessary announcement. But I can say at this time that those areas are declared no-build zones.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I now invite Ms. Leandra Roll of the Tribune to pose her questions.
Good afternoon. My question is for the minister. We know back in June, the Prime Minister announced that some 46 homes will be donated by Discovery Land Company Foundation to Abaco residents. And I just want to get an update on what's been happening with that. When can we expect construction to begin on that project? And possibly if you can also say who will be the priority recipients for these homes? Is there a specific criteria officials are looking at? Just some more information concerning that project.
Well, I can certainly say that that project is indeed progressing well, and the homes will all be given to Abaconians. I know that for a fact, and yes, that project is moving on well, and those homes will be given to those returning residents. The priorities will be determined as the policy is being now mandated by being crafted by the DRA in consultation with social services, et cetera. So I am not sure if Mr. Grant has anything further to add onto that, but I can say that we are moving forward with those projects. Mr. Grant, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, the planning and the development of that site is quite advanced at this point right now. We are going through the paces to make sure that all of the infrastructural needs of that development are consistent with the current regulations that are that have been put forward by the Bahamas government. So from the technical end, we are tackling all of the necessary steps to ensure that ground can be broken as soon as possible once all of the detailed planning is completed.
Okay, thank you. My second question is in relation also to, I know the minister spoke on the small home repair program and how officials are just working to resolve issues. But we've also been getting complaints still from teachers and other residents. They are saying that they still, they're waiting for supplies and that they're working, with no running water, electricity. I know that that's not under the purview of the ministry, but can he still perhaps say a timeline as to when they can expect to see receive supplies from this program?
Was that question for me? I know. Did we lose signal? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I don't have any timelines, but I can say that we are doing our best. The Water and Sewage Corporation, if you're talking about water, et cetera, has a very active executive chairman, and they're on the ball. So I'm sure at the appropriate time they will make the necessary announcement, and I'm sure they will fast track whatever efforts they have to make to bring relief under those conditions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Roll. And our next questions, I now invite, Ms. Karen Bain of Global FM Radio to pose her questions.
Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon to you and your team. Sir, during the recent passing of Hurricane East, the all clear was given. However, Grand Bahama was still experiencing aggressive wind gusts of more than 40 miles per hour. So much so, Minister was trauma, had to turn back of the most unfavorable wind conditions. This could have resulted in a serious catastrophe. Minister Lewis, there's a serious concern as to the credibility of the agency or persons responsible for issuing the all clear. Could you please comment on this for further reference?
Well, Karen, thank you very much for your question, and I was actively involved, being responsible for the EOC in Grand Bahama, as well as coordinating in Abaco and other islands. And yes, we are making the necessary adjustments to our protocol. We realized that the conditions on the ground in Grand Bahama was not favorable. It was not all clear. So I did the responsible thing by contacting the media and making that announcement to ensure that our residents were safe. And I didn't hesitate to do it, and I will do it again. But I'm hoping that we'll never get to that. So it's a matter of communication. It's a matter of understanding our protocol, because I believe that there was an overall umbrella protocol that was being looked at, but the specific spaces being totally coordinated. So we've learned from that. We'll make the necessary adjustment and understanding that we have to work together as a unit. We will not be pulling each other in different directions. We will have a cohesive understanding of the way forward.
Thank you very much, sir, for your answer. My next question is also for you, Minister Lewis. It has been over a year since the main thoroughfare leading into East Grand Bahama was severely impacted by Hurricane Dorian. Has any company been awarded the contract as yet to repair the damaged portion of the road? And how long would the repairs take? And if the contract was awarded, when can we expect for repairs to commence?
I know that the work is being scoped. We understand the seriousness of it. I can speak to the fact that the ministry, the areas that he's responsible for is aware there are portions of that road that also comes under the Grand Bahama Highway. So understanding who is responsible for certain areas, but we know that it must be fixed for people to traverse back and forth. And I must say that the Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama, the Deputy Prime Minister, he's agitating on a regular basis. We need to get it fixed. We understand the cry of our people. I'm from the eastern side of Grand Bahama, so I know how important it is. Efforts were made last week to mitigate some of the issues, but priority, particularly this week, I've received at least 10 calls from the Member of Parliament yesterday alone in that same regard. So you are apparently following his playbook. The whole thing is It is being addressed, and in a short time frame, we'll bring relief to the residents of East Grand Bahama.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Bain. And I now invite Sasha Lightburn of RTV to pose her questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. PS. Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon, Bahamas.
Good afternoon.
Minister, you would have spoken about Build Back Better. Are those housing guidelines in any way going to be embedded in legislation to ensure that contractors, architects, and anyone working in the construction industry are held to a higher standard now that these guidelines, I mean, it's all good and well to have guidelines, but if they aren't embedded into legislation, I mean, people can still do what they want to do. How is it that we are going to properly enforce this Build Back Better initiative?
Sasha, that's a very, very good question, and I can tell you that it will be embedded in our policy. Myself, along with the Minister of Works and his team, have been given focused attention to this, and the Minister of Works will speak to this more next week and during his report. But he's taken on the initiative where the senior person who's in charge of the Building Controls Department was given a specific assignment to make adjustments to the code, because we understand that not only must we reinforce our code, we must also enforce our code. So we will seek by all means necessary, because even sometime when it's embedded in policy, it can also be circumvented. So again, in order to make the Build Back better, we will reinforce the code, and this guideline will help, but of course, it'll become a part of our policy. And in addition to reinforcing the code, we have to enforce it, and that will be through a partnership with the government and private sector citizens. So to answer your question, yes, it will be policy.
Thank you, Minister. My next question is for Captain Russell, the Director of NEMA. Captain Russell, we know that NEMA had, I believe, just one instance of COVID-19, impact from COVID-19, where the office was shut down for one period. Can you confirm the amount of employees that have been impacted, and how has NEMA's operations been impacted by the pandemic directly?
Yes, good afternoon. Excellent question. Yes, a member of the staff of NEMA was impacted by COVID-19. He's a part of our warehouse management team, but he came into our operations center in that space just to help us set up a series of computers that we are seeking to upgrade our operations center. But all the persons who worked in close proximity with him, they were all asked to quarantine, likewise the rest of the staff. The Department of Environmental Health was called in to do a deep cleaning of the facility to make sure that the space is cleaned. And after the requisite time, the staff was all required to report back in. I didn't make contact with the person who was contacted, and he is doing fairly well. I stayed in contact with him during the course of the 2 weeks that he was quarantined, and he is doing well, he and his family.
Thank you, Ms. Lightburn. I now invite Jasper Ward of the Nassau Guardian to pose his questions. Mr. Ward?
Miss Ward, her questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. My
No problem.
pardon.
Unisex name, what can I say? My first question, in January, we had the pledge conference at Bahamas. One group in particular made a hefty pledge of nearly $1 billion. That was the P3 group. Now we're in almost November. We have heard no word as to whether the government will move forward with that offer. Can we get some answers as to what is happening as it relates to that pledge, Minister?
Thank you very much, Jasper, Ms. Jasper Ward. We have been in discussion with the P3 group, of course, along with the Ministry of Finance, because anything to do with finance and commitment along that line has to be vetted with the Ministry of Finance. And in fact, we were meeting with that group last week, Friday. And we have a report coming out in short order. We have some decisions to make, because not only the P3 group, but we have other group postings with similar offers. And once we would have made a determination with regards to the best way forward, because we will do our best to not add to our national debt. We'll look for the best fit to ensure that we build back better without adding anything to our national debt from our perspective, as much as we can help it. So yes, discussions are ongoing, and the media will be updated as soon as we come to some sort of an agreement.
Can I ask a follow-up that will not count as my second question?
PS is the moderator.
Sure, go ahead.
Can we have a timeline as to when we can expect to hear that?
No, like I said, the meeting was only on last Friday. There was a lot of information to absorb because we went into detailed discussions. We presented what our basic needs assessment. They promised to go back and they will get back to us. So again, once we come up to the meeting, we want to come up with a well-crafted plan whether we will move forward with them or not. But to answer your question, I cannot specifically give a timeline at this moment, but as soon as possible, as soon as we get it, we'll advise the media.
All right, thank you. And my second question, residents on Morris Island, Abaco, have been complaining of inoperable airport runway lights, a deplorable state of their clinic on the island, a damaged dock as a result of Dorian, and water that seems to go off for an hour at about 9 p.m. until 10 p.m. And they're saying that they're not getting any assistance from the DRA. Can we get a response, I guess, to the situation and how we're moving forward when it comes to restoration and recovery on Morris Island?
Well, I will not agree with the fact that they have not been giving any sort of attention by the Bahamas government, because I know otherwise to that question. I'm sure that we have been, and we have evidence to show that we have been assisting the residents of Morris Island. And I'll invite Mr. Grant now to even offer further information on that, because he's been on the ground. He has a team in Abaco, on the ground technical team that has been helping him to ensure that the needs, the scope, all of the issues are properly scoped, and we take action items out and step by step that we will bring resolve and relief to the residents of Morris Island. So, Mr. Grant, if you may, I would appreciate it if you would just offer further information in that regard.
Yes, thank you, Minister. The DRA has in fact visited Morris Island, and we have conducted assessments through our Small Home Repair Assistance Program. And we are quite actively pursuing discharging all of that relief that has been planned. We can also say that there is still much work to be done with respect to infrastructure and with respect to the other systems of government on that island. The DRA is still actively involved in discharging its duties on that island. We have yet more work to be done there, and the work is yet planned to be done. We will undertake to investigate the concerns that were noted, but we are not yet finished our work.
Okay, that brings to an end this press conference. I want to thank members of the press and members of the general public for tuning in to this press conference. Good afternoon.